Dear friends, like all baby boomers, I didn't experience World War II. I relied on the stories told me by my parents and their generation. And when I worked as a care assistant in a local hospital, I used to sit with elderly men and listen to their reminiscing on the war and particularly on VE Day. For many, that day, the 8th of May 1945, was a great day, 75 years ago. For others, the war didn't end, of course, till VJ Day, when the Japanese were defeated on the 14th of August 1945. Both ended the greatest period of human suffering the world has ever known. Yet even in their pain and suffering, those who came through the war knew that victory was from something, and this victory was for something. It was victory from Nazi fascism and its tyranny in the West. It was victory for a different sort of world, a different sort of society to the one they had entered the war as. And their vision was to build, you might say, a new Jerusalem, a new sort of society out of the rubble of Western Europe, a society which offered possibilities and hope for all peoples and was helped by the United States Marshall Plan. All had suffered, therefore all should benefit from the sort of society that was to be reconstructed. In Britain, this involved slaying Beveridge's 5 giants: want or poverty, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And Clement Attlee's Labour government was mandated to address these, and the way they did it was by nationalising essential industries such as coal, steel, and other utilities, transport, by taking on the 1944 Education Act with its commitment for compulsory education to 15, by setting up the cradle to the grave welfare state, by undertaking an enormous house building program which carried on thereafter, and in 1948 establishing the National Health Service. And so today we give thanks for VE Day and for that generation's conviction that this was a victory for a better world, a better society. And this is what we should be pondering upon. What sort of world, what sort of society would honour their sacrifice and their convictions today? In some ways, I believe it must be about recommitting ourselves to their dream of a new Jerusalem, a new sort of society, committed not to particular interest groups, but to the common good. The 21st century has witnessed 4 near shipwrecks of our society. The shipwreck of terrorism, 9/11 and the following terrorist acts, where the West is best, was challenged by Islamic radicals. The financial crisis of 2009, which nearly brought the world economy to its knees. Climate change challenge, which is laying bare the cost of unbridled and careless consumption. And now COVID-19, a virus spread swiftly around the globe because of globalization, and which has brought pain and suffering to many. In Sunday's Gospel reading, John chapter 14, verses 1 to 14, Jesus tells his friends not to let their hearts be troubled by his impending suffering and execution. The word translated troubled can also be translated as shipwrecked. He's telling them to avoid finding their lives shipwrecked. They should trust in God and trust in him, and to trust their futures to him. That means living in the light of the God Jesus lived himself under and whom he embodied, and thereby seeking to follow God's way that is Jesus' way, a way that seeks to love God wholeheartedly and to love our neighbour as ourself. In other words, to seek the common good, to be a sign of God's new society, God's new Jerusalem, which will become fully manifest at the end of the age. VE Day is about a victory for a society in which all can see themselves as neighbours and which our personal interests or interest groups are secondary to looking for this common good, this common blessing. And our prayer and challenge is to work with others to recover that vision for our society 75 years later, 75 years after VE Day.